Sidechain drums. Okay, so just like we use the sidechain for ducking with the vocals and the choir, what we can do is there's a lot of things we can do in the drums. So one of the most common things to do is to take and sidechain trigger the gate on the snare bottom from the snare top, because a lot of times the snare bottom picks up a lot of the kick drum in it. See how that you can hear the kick drum happening there? Luckily for us in this circumstance, the gate itself on the track worked out really well, and it was really easy to gate out that kick drum causing the extra buzz on the snare bottom. So we don't really need to do that on this circumstance. So that's a common one to use, and that's the way to fix it. Luckily, in our circumstance, with the way the drums are recorded and the song and everything, we don't have to do that. There's another cool one that we can do, and that has to do with having a room mic or some other mic that isn't specifically on one instrument and maybe picks up the sound of the snare drum really well. And so what I did was I pulled in our Tom 1 mic, and if you remember, Tom 1 was never hit during the song, and so we had a mic that was just sitting there recording the drum set from right by the tom, but the tom was never hit, and so it wasn't useful for the mix. It was just adding bleed. So if we listen to this mic, we can hear that we get a nice little sound of the whole kit, and that actually the snare sounds kind of cool in there. Okay, notice that we add that in and it makes the snare sound kind of nice. But the issue is we've got all this other stuff in there too. We don't just have the snare, we have the kick, and actually we can sometimes hear that tom mic kind of ringing and stuff. So what we want to do is we want to gate out everything else except for the snare. But because of the placement of that mic, if we just try to put a gate on there, we're going to find that it's not going to gate out all the stuff except for the snare, because there's other things that are loud too. I mean, that kick is pretty loud, so the kick's probably not going to get gated out. So what we have to do is trigger it by something that is only going to let the snare through. Okay, so here's what happens if we try to put the snare. See that as soon as we get the level so the snare comes through nice, that kick is just as strong as the snare. Okay, so what we're going to do is take our snare top mic, which has been gated already, and so is just the snare top, and we're going to use that as our sidechain input to tell this gate to gate our Tom 1 track. Okay, so we're going to use the same sends that we used before, and this time we'll use bus 14. Get rid of that, bring this up. Okay, and then we'll go to bus 14 right here. Turn our sidechain on. Okay, notice how it's identical there. Okay, so the main thing that we want is that attack and a little bit of the decay. So if we can increase the release there, we can get a little bit more of that sound of the snare drum. Okay, and then what we'll do after that is we'll compress that. So we'll go to Dynamics, Compressor Limiter. be kind of crazy with it. That's part of the effect here, is to be kind of brutal. Okay, if we just listen to our drums and the kick. See, that's without it. We add a little bit of body to the snare drum. Okay, and now it's functioning. I mean, that's a lot of times that's what you're going to do with a room mic or something like that, but actually when you're recording drums, it's really cool to just have some extra mics up in there, and so you have the opportunity to do something like this with it. But a lot of times what people do is they'll put a talkback mic in there and you know, record with it, and then maybe do something like this to it later in mixing. But that's a good way to use a sidechain on drums. So we took our extra mic, our extra kind of room mic, and used it to gate out everything except for the snare and just beef up the snare. So that's sidechain with drums.